in the world, but I can think of others. I don't want to bore everyone. Just
many times Argentina. You're right.
Let's just take that as a given. It's a stipulation for this argument. So let's go back, and you talked about our Constitution. You talked about our government. I couldn't agree more in its founding principles. But what is the main core lever that we, the people, have to ensure the proper execution of the governance with which we trust our elected officials? After all, they are of the people, by the people, and for the people. Abraham Lincoln said, "We are gathered here on this field to see that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." But what if it not perish from the earth in a battle, but in a deception?
Well, to answer your question, it's freedom of speech.
But freedom of speech, okay. But what more specifically, what is the actual sort of mechanic or the event by which the people keep the government and our elected officials, or replace them, or keep them in line?
Or via election.
Elections, exactly right. Now, if you no longer have the people actually able to elect officials, but instead the government in effect secedes from the people, and now your election is literally stolen from you through a series of mechanisms by which you are deceived, manipulated, disinformed, and then that act is covered up by the media, who is in league with the very people who stole it. Let's take an example. A couple of policemen come by and there's an arson. Okay, there's a building burned down. There's a bunch of gasoline cans, and they're cops. They're there to figure out what's happening. Now, if the cops are completely on the level and doing their job, they're going to say, "Hey, there's gasoline cans. Yeah, that suggests arson. We better start looking around and see how the fire started." Now, that's fine. But what if one of the cops, unbeknownst to the other, is the guy who started the fire and left the gas cans there, and he exerts his influence on the other cop to say, "Well, no, I don't think so. Those gas cans, I saw them there last week when the building was completely whole. That has nothing to do with this. Move on. Nothing to see here." Now, it's going to take that other policeman a longer time to figure out, wait a minute, my partner is disintelling me. So when the very people who are responsible for being the fifth estate, the journalistic informing of the public, are themselves paid shills and paid members of the conspiracy, and has been going on for a long time, you begin to get a situation in the country that's very psychologically brittle and disturbing. People are distressed. I see it all over. I talk to people all the time.
Well, but you talk about the election being stolen, and I don't think that happened. I do not, and I'll tell you why. This is not the first time that's happened. Was there voter fraud in this election? I think there absolutely was. And the one before that, and the one before that, and the one before that. I
get you. I don't disagree.
When Joe Kennedy went to John Kennedy, he said, "Look, how many votes do you need?"
You mean Daley?
Well, when Joe went to Daley.
Right.
But Joe went to John. How many votes do you need? Because it's going to cost me a bunch of money, and I don't want to pay for icing on the cake. I want to pay for you winning an election. Okay, and that was John Kennedy, the guy who many say was the last great president we had.
In some ways he was. In some ways he wasn't. I don't disagree with you. That happened. Don't disagree.
And before after that, so many people I still know think that Bush stole the election from Gore. Gore thought that. Gore still thinks that to this day.
And having examined that less specifically, I would say there's smoke there, maybe some fire. I don't know. But I can address what you just said.
In 16, Hillary Clinton to this day believes the election was stolen from her.
No, and because that's the cycle previous, that brings out some interesting questions. I mean, we could run down some rabbit holes. I don't think so.
Well, I don't think so either.
I think what happened there,
she believes that.
So again, this is a good way to frame this whole conversation. Remember, I said, hypothesize, if you will. Come with me and let me tell you a story. You don't have to believe it, but so it's the globalists versus the populists. Mm-hmm. They've been working on their agenda. One of the reasons I was a liberal, you asked before, why did I vote for Clinton? Because I was so disturbed and sort of disaffected by the Bush-Cheney regime, which I think of as a a warmongering neocon regime that wants to fight forever wars all over and just pump up the military and spend, billions of dollars enriching military contractors. And none of that is good for American economic nativism and populist sort of sovereignty, which I believe in.
And looking at how things went, there's an argument to be made for that statement.
Right. And so what I didn't realize was the players just switched teams. Obama, Clinton, Hillary, they're the same as Bush and Cheney, and Trump is different. He is a disruptor. He's a populist. He isn't owned by anyone. He doesn't have a political history that puts him into all these political divisions of big donors.
And I agree with that 100%.
Right.
So my question is, how did the globalist cabal allow Trump to win the election in 2016?
That's a good question. And as I haven't studied it, I don't know, but I have asked myself that question many times.
Because that's where I scratch my head and I think, I can't buy that. Now, you may or may not know this, but I'm going to say that I don't believe in these globalist cabals, etc. But if you'll turn around,
But they believe in you.
but if you'll turn around, there's a poster on the wall. I think Bigfoot exists. I really do. I think UFOs exist. I've seen them. Okay, so saying that,
There's a lot of crazy footage on UFOs.
so saying that, here's the guy who's refuting conspiracy theories and global cabal, who thinks that 10-foot creatures live in the woods and there's flying saucers landing. Okay, so take everything I say with a grain of salt.
No, good. Let's find common ground there. So what are you basically saying? You're saying that you believe that in many instances, things that are true. Now, I don't know who would want to hide the existence of Bigfoot. I can't find a political sort of side to that particular, but maybe it's down there somewhere. You got to go deep down these rabbit holes sometimes to find the truth. Nor do I know, well, it's much easier to project a conspiratorial agency of power that would want to hide alien existence. And a lot of those, there's a lot of film that's crazy. There's a lot of firsthand examples of things happening.
Well, but the reason I brought that up is, and I'm not going to say Bigfoot definitely exists. I'm saying, why couldn't some hominid that we haven't seen still live in a forest that people really don't go to? So I'm saying that it's a possibility. However, if I'm right or if I'm wrong, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
In the big scheme of things, okay?
That's not right. But I guess what you're saying is...
You mentioned Klaus Schwab, okay? To me, and people may be scratching their heads and who the heck are they talking about? Google Klaus Schwab, okay? To me, I know a lot of people think that he's a big-time player. To me, Klaus Schwab is the European version of Alex Jones.
No, but he is the head of the World Economic Forum, whereas Alex Jones is on a banned video. I'm now doing my Klaus Schwab, you see, because adding to his nefarious criminal character is a sort of a central casting Nazi accent with German. And so when you hear him talking and saying things like, by 2050, you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's just, I guess it just helps to deliver the point.
By 2050, he'll be dead. He's an old man.
But he is certainly constantly. I think one of the things we've been lured into.
He is, but he doesn't have any influence. Not really. Not on me. Not on you.
Well, but
he doesn't.
Okay, so
he's Alex Jones.
Again, I posit that this coming world influence that's going to step into our lives is imminent if we allow it to continue the way it's going. I don't disagree. And that's one of the ways that you talk to yourself as you're beginning to fight. Like, nothing's changed. No one's banging down my door right now. But that doesn't mean, I would submit to you that you could have found a lot of, I hate to use this example, and I'm using an example with extremity just for illustration purposes, but you probably could have found a lot of wealthy, happy Weimar Republic Jews in 1934 who would have said, it's just a bunch of talk. Nothing's going, and 6 years later, they're, in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. So that's a horrible example to use. But what I'm saying is, past performance is no guarantee of future results, as your broker says to you. We cannot assume that nothing will change from the comfortable existence we've had. How are those change? Well, what are the signs of this change? Well, a blatantly stolen election. Let me assure you, my friend. You and I can just make a side bet on a steak dinner. the country will entirely know that the election was completely stolen within a year. And I don't mean a little, I mean a lot. There's a huge story that you and I talked about off air before, and everyone should know about this. Let's ground this in some reality, because we're talking mostly theoretical, and that it's hard to do. It's a long conversation. And the other thing is, people are emotionally attached to the elements of reality that they consider security. We all are. It's human.
Sure.
And I have nothing but empathy for this. That's why I red pill people slowly, because it's like, look, just, can you hypothesize this? Okay. For instance, in conspiracy, let me ask you this. Can you not hypothesize that a bunch of people who are immoral, amoral, evil, think nothing of others' lives, are entirely driven by greed and the need for power, would be capable of being able to kill 3,000 of their own citizens to get 20 years worth of billions and billions of dollars of military contracts? Most people would say, yeah. I say, okay, 9/11. Boom. There it is. I mean, in a nutshell, what each people, no, they would never do that to their own country. Oh my God, of course they would.
Well, but
they would.
But you can't prove that with 9/11. I can't.
Actually, I can, but it's another podcast.
I've had countless people say, well, everybody knows the Pentagon was really hit with a cruise missile. And it's just wrong.
It certainly was. It wasn't a plane at all. There's never been an example of an airplane crashing and no wings or engines falling off. There are no airplane parts. We can go deeper on this. I'd be happy to come back and love it. Do 9/11, a special 9/11. We could do it on 9/11. I think it's coming up next week. So anyway, you probably got other guests and plans, but I volunteer my time. There's a lot there. It isn't what we were told it was. I mean, Building 7 hours later, the control collapse. That's where all the operations were. The CIA, FBI, everything went down Building 7. They shipped all the structural steel on barges and took it to Europe. The original film Loose Changes, the best documentary on this, and that was once on Netflix. Then they kicked it off to Amazon, each time editing it down. And now it's like on YouTube TV, and it's half the length of the original.
Well, I will tell you this. There are certainly things that happen with that whole 9/11 thing that just have me scratching my head too.
Right.
But that's the way it is with anything. It's something, nothing makes 100% sense all the time. And here was my epiphany. Years ago, I went to Dealey Plaza. I thought, I just have to see this. I was in Dallas on business. I wrapped up an appointment a little early. I didn't have another one until the next morning. I thought, I've got time. I'm going to Dealey Plaza to check this place out. Have you ever been?
I have.
Okay. That ain't a tough shot.
From the book depository?
Yeah.
No, but
it's not a tough shot.
No,
Would you agree?
Yeah, it's not a tough shot.
Especially that shot made by a Marine Corps marksman.
But wait, first of all, they didn't count on the Zapruder film, because I was raised as a hunter. I don't hunt any longer, but I'm a firearms guy from my childhood. My father taught me to shoot. My father was in the 82nd Airborne, landed in D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, was a champion shot both in the service and later rifle, pistols. So I'm a gun culture guy, and I've shot a lot of animals in my life, and never, ever have I shot anything from the front, from behind, that then blew out toward me. Now, Kennedy was shot from the front. It is very clear. There's a shot that goes through his throat, and then a shot goes through his head and his brain. Sorry for the audience, it disturbs me to blow out on the back of the car, and Jackie is scrambling to get the back of his head. Now, there's a terrible scene. I don't even mean to say it. There's nothing funny or anything but tragic about it. But that's not where they say Oswald was behind that. There's no way you can make a bullet go through someone's forehead when you're shooting from a book depository 400 feet above and behind them. End of story. Kennedy was killed by the CIA and Cuban operatives because he said it himself. I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. He was one of the few true presidents trying to wrest the United States of America away from the deep state. That's what I believe. That's a harder proof.
But Joe Kennedy was part of that whole conspiracy. Joe Kennedy, you could make an argument. He was one of the reasons why we didn't get into World War II as soon as we did. He was He borderlined on being pro-Nazi.
Agreed. I think one of the problems here in all this is we're talking about a lot of complicated narratives. So what happens when you get, I have some experience. I started a company in St. Louis, actually ended up doing pretty well. I was the chairman and CEO for the first 5 years. And eventually it was now bought by another big company, but it's an internet services company. And
that we've all heard of.
yeah. And